All right, I am going to hand my camera over, I believe, and we're going to get started here in just a second. All right, here we go. Are we good? Hello, we are on the bayou. Welcome aboard, everyone. I won't be able to see comments at this point. My husband is doing the camera work here, so he can relay some of them if need be. But thank you for joining us here on the bayou in Louisiana. Again, I saw several folks from Louisiana that I grew up with and that I know well, and some of you from Chicago, of course, who tune in virtually every Tuesday night to these tours that I offer through Chicago Movie Tours. So one of the most popular tours in Chicago is the Architecture Boat Tour, where you get to see the entire Chicago city through the river, or below the river, you might say. We're going to take that a different direction this evening by taking you to Louisiana, and you can look up and all around at the bayou here that we are on. So on this live virtual tour with me, I'm Kelly. I run Chicago Movie Tours. We're going to do three things. We are going to, number one, learn about bayous and their functions. Number two, we are going to see some indigenous trees, which you can probably see behind me and all around me here. Maybe an alligator. My mother, who is on the dock, just texted a moment ago. There is one over there near her. And our third goal for this evening is to discover why certain movies are filmed on or near these bodies of water. All right, so let's get moving here. And those of you who are from Louisiana, this is going to be a refresher about where you live currently, but those of you who are from Chicago, I'm going to give you a little bit more information about where we currently are. So we are in a town called Monroe, Louisiana, and we are in Ouachita Parish. You might remember from your geography classes that Louisiana has parishes, not counties. So the parish that we are currently in is Ouachita. It is not Ouachita, it is not Ouachita, it is Ouachita Parish. And the bayou that we are currently on is this one here. It's called Bayou Desiard, not Desiard. You'll learn that when you get down to Louisiana, lots of the words that you see are not necessarily spoken as they are written out. So we are in Ouachita Parish on Bayou Desiard here. And if you get a little bit closer to this map, perhaps you can see Monroe here. And the bayou all the way over here on the right-hand side of the screen runs through pretty much the entire city of Monroe. So we're just going to get a little bit of a portion of the bayou today. And it's the primary water source for the city itself. And it is used, as you can see us doing here, for boating. It's also used for fishing, and I should point out water skiing. So the university that is located in Monroe, Louisiana is the University of Louisiana at Monroe, and the water ski team uses this bayou to practice. And I want to point this out because this water ski team is a 29-time national championship water ski team, I should say. And we were talking about alligators a moment ago. Interestingly enough, but about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where the water ski team practices near the university, there was a 12-foot alligator that someone had to come in, rescue, get out, and move elsewhere because you don't want to be practicing water skiing in that location, right? All right, let me give you one more word here before we start heading a little bit further behind me. And this word here is bayou. So this is the Choctaw word for bayou, and it basically means a sluggish or stagnant water course. So this is where the word comes from, of the bayou that we are currently on. All right, so let me talk with you a little bit about the trees and some of the indigenous aspects of the bayou that you're seeing here behind me. So the bald cypress is the tree that we are currently floating in and around and through. And as you can probably guess from where we are, the bald cypress prefers very wet soils, flat land, and lots of humidity. And if you have visited Louisiana, you know that all three of those are very common to this area. So the let's see if we can turn over here, maybe Kent, to the right. You can see there's a very wide base to the bald cypress trees, and you can see hanging from several of the limbs, maybe not so much these, but over here to the left. Yeah, go over that way. You can see moss, right? All sorts of moss hanging from the limbs of the bald cypress. And I should also say that this is called Spanish moss, but it's neither from Spain nor is it actually a moss. It's really from the pineapple family, oddly enough. And It's referred to by the Native Americans who were first in this area as tree hair. And if you get really close to it, you might definitely notice that it does look like really curly hair. And when the French explorers came to this part of the state of Louisiana, they referred to it as Spanish beards. And that's because they were reminded of the Spanish conquistadors' long beards. And that was really a dig, pretty much from the French to the Spanish. They're calling it that. But you can see how, especially over here, try over that side for just a second, how it wraps around and droops from the branches or the barks of the trees. And this is, of course, what do we see? Oh, over here as well. Perfect. We're getting a little bit closer, actually. There you go. There's a little bit closer moss for you there. So one thing that's interesting about this, particularly from the 1930s, I have an advertisement here where we learn that the Spanish moss was used for stuffing car seats, like automobile seats, as well as mattresses and furniture in the 1930s. So it's had several uses, obviously, other than just hanging here from trees. But it's called the bald cypress because all of these green leaves that you're seeing here kind of below the moss are going to drop all of their petals and their needles in the winter time, and they're going to look very bald or naked, as we say down here in the South. What else can we point out about the cypress trees? The cypress knees. We could talk about that, and I think we're headed towards some cypress knees at this point. But if you look at the base of the cypress tree, you're going to see these little woody projections that are popping up over here to Kent's right. These are called cypress knees, and they do two things really for the bald cypress. Number one, they're for support. So they help stabilize the tree against hurricane force winds, which you know is quite good for the New Orleans, the southern part of Louisiana. So they support. And then also number two, they help for breathing. So they help these trees that are consistently standing in water get some oxygen up to the rest of them. So let's see, maybe, yeah, here's a good shot. Maybe you can see kind of through there, those little woody projections sticking up, which are the cypress trees, of course. So these trees, I'm not quite sure exactly how old the ones we are going through right now are, but they can grow for thousands of years, and they can reach heights of up to 150 feet. So maybe tilt the camera up a little bit. And there's a tree in Florida called the senator, and it is established to be about 3,500 years old, which makes it, I believe I read, the 5th oldest tree in the world. And Seminoles and other Native American tribes used this massive tree, this bald cypress called the senator, as a landmark when they were in that area. And unfortunately, it was tragically pretty much destroyed by arson in 2012. Whoops, got some Spanish moss on my head there. It's tragically destroyed by arson in 2012. So here is a picture of really all that's left of it. So you can see the massive trunk there, and then there's this gate that's kind of been placed around it. So obviously there's not going to be another situation like that again. So there's a little bit about the cypress trees and the cypress knees. So if you're looking around up here, you would potentially see habitats for eagles. You would see birds' nests in the top of these trees and the crowns, the seeds of the bald cypress, massive food source for squirrels, ducks. As I mentioned a moment ago, you can see alligators. When we were doing a test run a little bit earlier, around 2 o'clock today, we saw 3 alligators out here. I don't know if we're seeing many right now. My husband promised me if he saw one, he'd let us know. So haven't heard anything about that yet. But you could definitely find alligators all throughout here, as well as snakes, frogs, turtles, just as you all would expect to see in a bayou, of course. Do what? Oh, there's ducks. Yeah, we just missed some ducks that flew over. And the last thing to note here is that these bayou areas work as flood mitigation, basically. So they act like huge sponges, and they absorb water when it's overflowing and flooding and those sorts of things. And one of the questions that I was kind of anticipating that perhaps you might ask in the comments is what's the difference between a bayou, a marsh, and a swamp? So I thought we might talk about that, and then we're going to get to, as promised, the movies that are filmed here, or a few of them. So bayou, marsh, and swamp. So all three of these are wetlands, right? They are all very low-lying areas. They are all overly saturated with water, as you can see obviously here. The swamp of those three is saturated with water all of the time, of course, but it's dominated by trees that are growing in the water. So it makes it really neither land nor water, and it's kind of hard to traverse. Now you can see how pretty easy it is for us to traverse this. So that doesn't really consist as a swamp. So here's really a quick picture of a swamp. So it does look similar in the case of the bald cypress, the moss, the cypress knees, those sorts of things. But it's much more difficult to traverse through. So there's a swamp, and here is an example of a marsh. So a marsh, again, also low-lying, also saturated with water, exists in areas of relatively poor drainage, but it's usually treeless. You notice that in this picture, lots of trees. In this picture, no trees at all. It's dominated pretty much by grasses and plants, right? And then the bayou, which we are obviously currently on, is a slow, small moving waterway. So the difference between this and those other two, in some regard, is that this one that we are on is a tributary to another body of water. So in our case, Bayou Desiard that we are on receives inflow from two different lakes. One is called Bartholomew Lake and one is called Black Bayou Lake, which is a little confusing. So this one then is a tributary, where those other two not so much. All right, so you've got a little bit more information there than probably, hopefully you had before, about bayous and some of their functions and what kind of habitat live out here. So as promised, our third goal for the evening is to talk a little bit about some movies that have filmed on the bayou and potentially why they do so. Now, if you've been around Chicago movie tours for the last 3 years or so, you might have been to one of the programs that I have done that talks about Mardi Gras and the movies. And I mentioned toward the end of that program, I think, that we have over 200 movies that have represented in some way Mardi Gras. And actually, many of those movies, as well as others, of course, incorporate bayous in them, which makes sense, of course, since most of them are set in Louisiana. Most of those, and most of the ones that we're going to talk about actually, are set in southern Louisiana, so more near the New Orleans area than where we are. And I should point out maybe to my Chicago folks that we are about 4 hours north of New Orleans, so we're a pretty good distance away from that area. All right, so let me give you 7 movies here really quickly, and let me know in the comments if you've seen any of these, and maybe remember the bayou scenes from them. So here's our first one. This is from 1997. It's called Eve's Bayou. And this basic story is we have a 10-year-old girl here that discovers a lot of secrets about her really wealthy African-American family. She's a little bit uncomfortable with all of this, being the age that she is, and she seeks comfort in an aunt who is psychic, right? So keep that kind of in mind. Sorcery, psychic, that sort of thing. So here's another one, also from 1997. This one is called The Apostle with Robert Duvall, and you can see him here being baptized in the water. But he, in fact, is actually a sinner with a secret, you might say, who undergoes this big spiritual transformation and this rebirth in a predominantly black bayou town closer to New Orleans. All right, so we have secrets, right? Secrets in these 2 movies. Let's move on to a couple of animated films here. So this one is one I remember watching. This is from 1977 called The Rescuers, where you have down in the bottom here these 2 little mice who have to travel through Devil's Bayou to help a little girl named Penny who is kidnapped by treasure hunters. So we have Devil's Bayou, right? And I also should say for my Chicago folks, the little mouse here, the little male mouse, is named Bernard, and he's voiced by Chicago's own Bob Newhart. So you should check that out if you've not seen this movie. But we have Devil's Bayou, right? All right, here is another animated film that uses the bayou heavily in it, called The Princess and the Frog from 2009. And this is really a young girl who's learning how to navigate her life in this kind of fairy tale world, right? She has to do this with a voodoo witch doctor in the picture. She has to deal with turning people into frogs. And it's all set in this swampy area where there are potentially dangerous creatures lurking around, as you can see perhaps in the top up there as well. All right, so even in animated films, we've got the bayou represented. Here's another one for you from 2012, Beasts of the Southern Wild. This one was nominated for lots of Academy Awards. And we have this 6-year-old girl here who has to learn how to fend for herself from these fantastical beasts that threaten her home in the bayou. This is really an allegory about Hurricane Katrina and it hitting New Orleans. So this is an example of magical realism, if you're familiar with that term. And then I have two more for us here, both of which are horror films. Right? So this one is from 1980. This is called The Beyond. And the story of this one goes that you have a woman who inherits this old hotel in Louisiana. And as she is trying to renovate this hotel, she learns that it was built over an entrance to hell. So she's got that going for her. And then here's another horror film called Hatchet. And this is a slasher film from 2010 in which a woman exacts revenge from the Bayou Butcher, or I should say against the Bayou Butcher. All right, so we have secrets, we have spirits with voodoo and psychics, and we have sinister things, right, lurking in Hatchet and the other horror film. So that's kind of three themes we can talk about that are associated with this place that's right here behind me. So we have secrets with Eve's Bayou, for example, and the Apostle. We have spirits or spiritual things or themes. It could be religion, as in the Apostle, or voodoo. Dealing in spells and sorcery as well. And then sinister. You see something? Oh, we've got some ducks up there. Yeah, wood ducks that are flying by. There you go. There's a little wildlife for you. Still not seeing any alligators, but nonetheless. So we have secrets, we have spirits, and we have sinister things like Devil's Bayou, for example, the entrance to hell, the Bayou Butcher, right? So bayous then in movies, as some of you are pointing out in the comments at the top of this, what bayou means to you really does have dark, stagnant secrets, which makes sense, right? You have this body of water here with things lurking underneath that you don't know what's going to pop out on you necessarily. Do we see? Oh, we have lots of ducks. Is that ducks over there? Oh, I see lots of mosquitoes too, as we just pan the camera over. But these are kind of uncontrollable wild places. It's, as we were pointing out, when the difference between bayous, marshes, and swamps, it's neither land nor water. So these bayous and swamps and marshes represent this kind of liminal space in between, which is a little tricky and secretive if you think about that. But we have bayous often in films associated with death, disease, blackness, dangerous places, those sorts of things, providing home for deadly creatures. I mean, you can look up Swamp Bayou, Swamp Monster, those kinds of movies as well, which I didn't necessarily bring into the picture. But you do have this notion of supernatural evil lurking below these waters. And, you know, we're doing this at kind of magic hour and a little bit past magic hour at this point. But, you know, if we were out here for another hour or maybe 45 minutes, these waters are going to get really dark. And they're not going to be nearly as inviting, you might say, as they currently are. So it definitely works for these themes of secrecy and supernatural things, right? And one thing I want to point out before we close here with regard to some of the negative aspects is there's a positive aspect if you start looking at movies and stories of enslaved people. So during the Civil War and before the Civil War, when you were having freedom seekers trying to get out of the South, the swamp for them was actually a place of refuge and hideaway. So that's a relatively positive way of looking at swamps and bayous and those sorts of things that really do have a lot of negative representation in films. All right, so we have secrets, we have spirits, we have sinister, and we have safety, right, in some of these regards as well. All right, I think that does it for our 3 goals for this evening, which was to learn a little bit more about bayous, to take you around Bayou Desiard here in Monroe, Louisiana, in Ouachita Parish. You saw some indigenous trees. We didn't see an alligator. We can still look for that as we're heading back here. And hopefully you learned a little bit about why certain movies are filmed either on or near these bodies of water. So let me really quickly grab the camera from my husband, and I am going to show. There you go. Hello. There's my dad behind the boat there. And there's my husband, who was helping us out so much with the camera work. He said he wanted to be known as the producer, not the cinematographer, but you know, that's all right as well. And as I usually do with these virtual tours, I don't know how this is going to work with an iPad up here, but if you want to buy either of these two fellows a drink, and send a tip our way for heading down the bayou for you and letting you learn a little bit more about movies. You can hit that QR code, or you can go to Venmo or PayPal if you want to. But we do appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I don't know if I'll be able to read any comments, but I'm definitely going to look at those after we get through with our virtual tour here. And I'll try to get back with you if you have any questions that I did not get to answer. So we'll leave you here with a lovely shot of Bayou Desiard. And thank you very much for joining us. Oh, they're saying there's an alligator. My mother's over here at the, let's see where. Oh, it's right there. We're going to head toward an alligator. So maybe you will get to see one. Okay. We're heading back to the dock. You never know what's going to happen live. Oh, he just went under. Maybe he'll pop back up. We'll keep the camera on it for a sec. But usually the motor sort of deters them, so. Oh no. There you go. I don't see it popping back up, but we can give you a lovely view of the sunset over here behind me if you want to do that. Just flip the little camera button twice, and it should give you the full screen. There you go. Perfect. All right. Again, thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see most of you, those Chicago Movie Tours fans and folks, back here next Tuesday night for Movie Censorship and Chicago. And of course, those of you from Louisiana who want to join, please do check out Shy Movie Tours on Facebook or ChicagoMovieTours.com. See you next time. Thanks so much.